Okay. Zok Tehillah Mishnah. This is going to sum up a lot of what we learned over the last week. The Mishnah says we're going to be analyzing that you can divert Yerusha if you're diverting it to one of the Yarsha. If you remember, this was a very consequential halacha because we had a shaila on Friday. The Mishnah said if you give something b'loshem matana, then you can divert to whoever you want because it'll be chal koidim misa. But if you use the lashon Yerusha, it won't work unless you hold like Rabbi Yochanan Breika. And we also learned that if you use a mix of Yerusha and matana, it also works. And the Gemara worked out when it works and when it doesn't. And one of the rayas that the Gemara wanted to bring that if you use a mixed lashon of Yerusha matana, it works no matter what, is some abraisa that said if I give it to one person, vacharecha yarshai. And the Gemara said that you have a raya, it must be that since matana was only mentioned once, it counts. But then the Gemara said no, if you hold the Rabbi Yochanan Breika, it could be speaking where the first person was getting it Torah Yerusha as well, and you never use the lashon matana. Right? Okay, so Zok the Gemara vayta. Ha'omer ish ploini yirasheni b'makom sheyesh bas. Someone said, I want Pliny to yarsh me, even though he has a daughter who would have been in, I call her a first round draft pick. Because there's no sons, there's only a daughter. So she's in the first round draft pick. Yet he says Pliny should yarsh me. The Rishbam says, who does he mean? Afilu Achiv, even his brother, it might be referring to his brother, B'makom sheyesh lahu mitzava bas, if the mitzava does already have a daughter. Or Biti Tirasheni, my daughter should yarsh me, the Mokim Ben, when she has a son. Again, she's a second round draft pick, not a first round draft pick in this case. So in all these cases, is Loy Omar Klum, it doesn't work. Shehisna al Masha Kosa B'Torah. The Torah says that Yerusha goes to either the son first, and then the daughter, and then the father, and then the siblings, and you can't change that. So one of the things that bothered me, that I don't have a pshat, maybe someone would share it with me if they have a pshat, is the Mishnah saying if it's in the first round draft pick, you could do it. So Ben Abonim you can do, but not Bas Ben Abonim. Bas is not the first round draft pick, she's second round draft pick. In the case of the Bas, it says instead of giving it to my daughter, I want to give it to my brother. The brother is not the second round draft pick. The father would be the second round draft pick. So why does the Rishbam pick a case where a guy's in the third position and he's diverting from the first to the third? Why didn't the Rishbam pick a case where he's diverting from the first to the second?
That's why the Mishnah didn't say it.
What?
The Mishnah says Pliny.
Right, but we don't know who that Pliny is.
I think the Rishbam is trying to narrow it that it's somebody in the Basra.
I hear.
It's not.
So Akiva wanted a taina. I hear. Akiva wanted a taina that maybe the Rishbam doesn't want to refer to a case of a tragedy. When someone's father is yarshening him, it means he died before his father. But the reason why I brought it up is because technically everybody is a potential Yerush from your Shevet, that is. Anybody from your Shevet is a potential Yerush. The way we learned, you go all the way back to the Shevet, and you'll find somebody. So does the Mishnah mean to include anybody from your Shevet, just not from a different Shevet? Is there a limit to how far you could divert? I don't have the answer. So Zok the Gemara about here. Rabbi Yochanan Breika Omer, Im Omar Al Misha Royal Yarshai Devar of Kayam. If you diverted Yerusha to someone who's on the same round draft pick as the person you're diverting it from, it will work. V'al Misha Ein Royal Yarshai, but if it's someone who's not in the first round, Ein Devar of Kayam. Now I'm sure you're all wondering why I read my biased shot into the Mishnah. And that's speaking of first round draft, but that's exactly what the Gemara is going to be discussing. Zok the Gemara, let's analyze the first half of the Mishnah. Taimo the achar b'mokim bas or bas b'mokim ben, because they're not in the same round of the draft. Ha ben abonim. What would the first canon or Mishnah hold if you wanted to divert it from one son to a different son, or bas ben abonis, one daughter amongst the other daughters, the var of kayam, and that would work. Ema seifa. Let's look at the Seifa. Let's look at the opinion of Yochanan Breika. I'm just a little nervous that there's might be people upstairs that are waiting. You think it's possible? Shul will know. I told Shul that I'm coming downstairs. It's possible they're only going to come at 8:20. I think they're only going to come at 8:20. Yes, I wouldn't worry. At 8:20, we'll worry about it. I don't want to make you mishiga. Ema Sefer is a Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Omer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika said, "Im Omar al Misha Rol Yoshoi Dvarv Kayom." Right, the Gemara, Hanyu Tanakama. The way we understood the Tanakama is that's exactly what the Tanakama say. If you're diverting the Yerusha to somebody who's on that same level, it will work. Because the Tanakama only says that if you're diverting it to a later level, that's when it doesn't work. So how do we have over here? What is the machlokes here between Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika and the Tanakama? Frank the Gemara, v'chitema Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, afilu achar b'mokim bas ubas b'mokim ben ka'amar. And if you want to learn pshat in the second half of the Mishnah, not like I learned it, but rather saying, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika said al misha royal yarsha, he means anybody who's royal yarsha, even though he's in a future round. Even that would work. It can't be that. It can't be pshat in Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, because who would better know what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika meant more than his own son? Vatanya Rabbi Shmuel ben Noshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Omer, Loi nechlechu Abba v'chachamim. My father didn't argue with the chachamim al achar b'mokim bas ubas b'mokim ben. So lo yomer klum. That for sure would not work. Al ma nechlechu. Where is there a dispute between my father and the chachamim? Al ben abanim ubas ben abonis, because over there sha'aba omer yiresh v'chachamim omer lo yiresh. So clearly Rabbi Yochanan only said his halacha if it's in the same round. How will that make sense? Because that's exactly how we determine pshat in the Tanakama. So what are they arguing about? Zok to Gemara, we have two options. Iba Yisema, who said Rabbi Shmuel is the only one who knows what his father said. I know for a fact that when Revelia was nifter and his son Yudi wanted to take over and say his father shiurim, he needed to be taught those shiurim by Moshe Yosef Moldaver, by Avi Gribner. It's funny that all of the shiurim that Yudi's face says his father's shiurim, he never was in his father's shiur, so he got it from the Toronto boys, Moshe Yosef Moldaver, Avi Gribner. Those are the ones who taught him the shiur. So sometimes maybe a stranger might know more about what your father said than you yourself said. I asked the Mechfrekin, so why aren't they the Rosh Yeshivas of Philadelphia? Why is Yudi's face? Kasha.
Not to you.
It has to do with your last name. It has a lot to do with your last name. Dr. Gemara, it's funny how informative our Gemara is. It talks about so many different sugyas. So Dr. Gemara, Iba Yisema, Midika Amar Lo Nechleku, Michlal, the Tanakama Savri Nechleku. Maybe Hagufa, the fact that Rabbi Shmuel is taking a stand to tell us what his father meant, it must be that he heard others who said what he felt was incorrect. So obviously there are those who argue on Rabbi Shmuel about what his father said, and they understand that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika said as halacha, even if you're diverting it to a second round or third round draft pick, it would still work. So based on that, our Mishnah here is not following the understanding of Rabbi Shmuel. It's following the understanding of other Talmidim, of Avi Grubner, of Moshe Yosef Moldaver, about what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika said, and that is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika holds, even if you're diverting it from a ben to a bas, or from a bas to an ach, that will work, and the Tanakama holds it will. That's one shot. Or maybe our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Shmuel. However, in fact, our Mishnah is not a machlokes. Our Mishnah is all Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika taught. But there's some words that need to be edited into the Mishnah. Making that same diuk as we made before. Habas ben abonois who ben abonim. Imamar yirish kol nechasov devar kayamin. And here's where the editing happens. Not Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Omer, rather she Rabbi Yochanan Omer. So just adding a shin. She Rabbi Yochanan Omer. Imamar almi sharoli yershoi devarav kayamin. And according to this pshat, of course, Rabbi Yochanan only was referring to diverting it to someone on your level of Yerusha. Beautiful. So now we have our two versions of what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika actually said.
Sure, it's on the same level, not the same. It could be anybody in that parsha. The next in line. Yeah.
Any ben abanim and bas ben abanim, but not bas ben abanim. He could only give it to someone who is yarishing, who's actually an active yarish. He could only divert it to an active yarish. Instead of him getting a regular share, he's going to get everything. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Halacha Rabbi Yechon Mabrecha. And Rosh Bam says that this is the two Rabbi Yechon Mabrecha. I'll call Rabbi Yechon Mabrecha max and Rabbi Yechon Mabrecha light. So we're paskening like Rabbi Yochanan and Ben Broka light, because Dr. Ishbam, if he was paskening like Rabbi Yochanan Broka max, he should have spoken out afilu bas bein abonim. So since he just says it regular, it means light only ben bein abonim. V'chein amarava halachic Rabbi Yochanan Broka. Amarava, my time at Rabbi Yochanan Broka. What is the reasoning for Rabbi Yochanan Broka? So we actually know already what the reason is, because we learned this several blot ago. Amar krava haya b'yoyman chilo yasbanav. We know it from V'haya b'yoyim and Chila Yismanav. The Torah nos nereshus la'av lahanchel l'chol mishi yirtza. A person could be manchel Yismanav. He could pick. He could do it. It's up to him. Zok to Rashbam. That's very good if it's ben abanim. It doesn't think the V'haya b'yoyim and Chila is bitov or is echov. So it's mashma maybe from the pasuk that it only means if you're in that draft. Zok to Rashbam. No, banav could mean an example of your yorish. Banav just means next of kin. Now, if you remember, couple of blot ago, the Gemara also said that this was the reasoning for Rabbi Yochanan ben Brecha, but the Gemara said that the pasuk might be used for something else. And if you remember, the Gemara brought a brisa that brought five reasons to prove the following shaila. The Gemara had a shaila. A bachar gets pishnayim. What does it mean that he gets pishnayim? Does that mean that you take the whole estate, you divide it into three? He gets 2 out of 3 parts, and the remaining part gets split evenly amongst the brothers, which would leave the brothers which are much smaller chelik. Or do you say you just split it up into one more part than the amount of brothers, and he gets 2 parts compared to what his brothers get? Right. So the Gemara brought a brisa that brought 5 rayas that you don't do it where the bechar gets pishnayim connected to them, and one of the rayas was from the pasuk of V'haya b'yoyim and Chila Yismanav. And the Torah was ripsa Yerusha Levanav. The Torah wants that the Banav should get a lot, and if we give the Bechor too much, it's going to be to the detriment of the rest of the children. So that was another thing that we use this puzzle for. So the Gemara says the reason why the Brisa had to bring more psukim and rayas that the Bechor doesn't get connected to Kulam is because this Brisa, this pasuk might be busy entertaining the limud of Rabbi Yochanan ben Brecha that teaches us that a father could divert the Yerusha from one son to another. Why would I need a pasuk of the V'haya b'yoyim and Chila Yismanav? I have another pasuk that would have told me the same thing, because the Torah only by a bechor says lo yuchal levaker. You're not allowed to divert the chelik habechor. So why can't we say if the Torah is going out of its way to tell us that you cannot divert the chelik habechor, can I not figure out from there that I guess the regular chelik you could divert? Zok Gemara, no, because hahu miboyle lechedetan. We still need that pasuk, even if it says v'haya b'yom and chila esbanav. We know already that you could be manchul, you can divert Yerusha. I would not necessarily know that. I would not necessarily, but by bechor I can't. Why lechetanya? Abba Chanan Amar Mishum Rabbi Eliezer. Abba Chanan said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. Ma Talmud Loimer lo yuchal levaker. Why does it say lo yuchal levaker? Levi shenemar, we could have learned it from v'haya b'yom and chila esbanav. Sheyochal, but I didn't. If anything, it's a kal v'chayim. Ma poshet sheyofa koichay shenoitel b'roi kavamuksa. Who has a greater grasp on their chelik hayerusha? Would you say the poshet or would you say the b'chor? Zok Gemara, it's logical that the poshet has a greater grasp. How do you know? Because what if when the father dies, he didn't have certain field, and the field only came into the estate after the father died? We know the halacha is a regular person gets part of the Yerusha, but the Bechor doesn't get Pishnayim from that Yerusha. So that shows quite clearly that you have a much greater grasp of the Chelik HaPoshet from the Chelik HaBechor. So you can make a Kavachaymer. Uma Poshet sheyofa koichai shenoitel even beroyu kavamuchsuk. Nevertheless, the Torah says you could give it away. The father could divert it. Bechor, who has a lesser grasp of his chelik, Shahura koichai. Why? She'enoi noitel b'roi kiva muchzik. Loi kolshagain. Surely a Bechar's nachla, the father should be able to divert. So therefore, Talmud Loimer lo yuchal abakir. So you can't tell me that when the Torah of Yabem Chilas Bonav, to tell you dafke the chelak haposhit you could divert, but not the chelak habachar. To the contrary, because you would make a kavachomer if you could divert the chelak haposhit, you could surely divert the chelak habachar. So the Torah had to go out of its way to tell us lo yuchal abakir, you cannot divert the chelak habachar. So Frank the Gemara once it says lo yuchal abakir, so why can't they say the opposite? Lo yuchal abakir dafke the chelak habachar, make a dik, but not the chelak haposhit. So why do I need v'haya b'yom and chilu espanam? So tomorrow b'yom lo yuchal avakir ma'atam edloimer v'haya b'yom and chilu espanam. So yachol, because I would go the other way. Well, I didn't. Uma b'char shahu rakoichay. Sheinu nekel b'roi kav muchser. Amr Torah lo yuchal avakir. Hoshit to yafa koichay. Sheinoitel b'roi kav muchser. Loi kol shagain. Talmud loimer v'haya b'yom and chilu espanam. Atari nos rashus la'ab a handful of chol mishiyot. Logic will dictate that a pashut you cannot divert, and a bechor you could divert. So you need two psukim, one to tell you that the pashut you may divert, and the bechor you may not divert. Amar Rab Zrika, Amar Rab Ami, Amar Rab Chanina, the Bachtiks in Amar Rab Yanai, Amar Rebbe, Halacha, Rab Yochanan ben Broika. We pass like a Rechem ben Broika, again, Rab Yochanan ben Broika light, that you could divert to ben Avodim. Amar le Rab Abba, not that Rebbe said we pass like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika. There was a din Torah, and the father gave the Yerusha all to one of his sons, and Rebbe paskined that they get it, not to the daughter, to one of the sons. Right? Rebbe paskined, did you get it? So So the question is, there's a machlokes here if it's more significant that Rebbe said the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, or if it's more significant that Rebbe actually paskined that way in its entire. Mar Savar halacha adifa, and therefore he quoted Rebbe as saying the halacha, which is like Rabbi Zrika Marbami, Mar Savar, and Reb Abba held Ma'aser Rabba. So it's a much better proof that that's halacha if you could show, you could demonstrate that he paskined that halacha l'ma'aser. And the Rashbam explains to us the pluses and minuses of a hayra versus a psak. Halacha adifa, shepoisik halacha lasis king. He's saying the halacha is ABC. Avachir in hayra. If we just have an example of a dayan who paskin something, and you're figuring out that his psak halacha must stem from the fact that he holds that a father could divert, you might be wrong. Ikala memory the ta haraya. The person who saw the psak might not have understood all the nuances of the case and all the reasons. Maybe there were other factors involved that led to that psak. Who said it was due only to what you think it was due to, such as that you could divert? The Shema Oisei Adin, Loi Nivsak Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika. Just because you saw one of the sons get all the Yerusha, who said it's because of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika? Maybe El Aidei Tiny Sacheres, Zika is called the Chosim, Lechad ben Abanim. Maybe there's some other Tanya that made one son entitled to everything. You might ask, what could possibly explain it? Very simply, like we just had yesterday. We just learned it yesterday. So maybe it was a matana. So therefore, just seeing that Rabbi awarded all of the estate to one of the children doesn't really prove anything, because you don't know the reasoning involved and you're not familiar, you might not be familiar with all of the nuances of the case. And then the Gemara asks a kasha. So this the Sover Aroya Mishum High Time in Nifsa by Maisa was really Mishum Time Achrin. But if you said Halacha Kain, I will keep in the Kav Halacha, Oz, Ein Lefashers Bedover, then you don't have to be concerned. So that was the first sheet. It's better if you have a Dayan who said this is the Halacha. But Umaisa for Maisa Rab, Kishem Moir and Lasas Maisa, if they actually pass like this, Halacha Maisa, Oz, Yesh Lismach Velasais, then you could talk and rely on it. But if he just says in Shir Halacha Kaploini, he might just be saying, in Lumdas. Then ain't saying Lasas came. You can't rely on it. Halacha Lamaisa. And we're going to soon see if the project says Halacha Lamaisa, he doesn't say Halacha, that is the better of both worlds. The Yamar Halacha plain, Ikalameimar, the Derech Lemuda Yamarachi. He was going based on the Lumdas of the Sugya. It wasn't really Halacha Lamaisa. But if he would have actually been asked a question about this halacha, have a medactic Yosy, he would be more medactic. Kadrim besamach ein lameid in halacha mipitalmud. Al mishahayir lasos, he passed it that way. Tov ein lefashur zachar. I remember I had a way where it would be mutter to use an instantaneous water heater in Yom Tov. And I discussed with Rabbi Shlomo. Said, yeah, Pashas, it's okay. I said, okay, can I do it? No. Pashas is okay. It's oikaf and halacha. I don't want to do it. So that's the difference of halacha, but not necessarily moirin kei. Chaim Tzvi told me a story about the Chasam Sofer. There's a stira between what he paskined and what he once wrote in his halachas on Shas. So they called him on it. How could you paskin this way? In Chidushim on Shas, you said otherwise. So he said, when I say Chidushim on Shas, we all know when a Rav paskins a shaila, he has a special shat d'shmaya to paskin properly. When a Rav says Ashir and says Alamdus, he doesn't have that shat d'shmaya. So if you ever see a contradiction between what I said in halachas, but what I said in the sugyas, and what I said in shuvas always takes precedent because that's when I had the guiding light of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Zok to Gemara
Only
Vayter.
for that person.
What?
Only for that person.
What do you mean?
For the person who was asking.
Um,
The Siyat L'Shmaya comes for the Maksha is part of that.
I'm not sure because the Gemara here is saying once you pass on Lechal Maisa, you could rely on it. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Now this is a very yesodistic Gemara that tells us if you for all of us aspiring dayanim, we're going to want to know who to paskin like. This is the key. If you want to be a dayan, know this Gemara, and then you'll be able to paskin properly. Tanu Rabbanan, ein lemeidin halacha. You cannot learn halacha lemaisa loy mipi Talmud. We'll have to see what that means. The loy mipi maisa ad sheyoymer loy halacha lemaisa. So let's look at the Rishbam what it means. Ein lemeidin halacha klemer ein lemeidim lasot. You can't take out halacha lemaisa to actually do that. Loy mipi Talmud. Meaning, Shimloimi Rav, Derech Lemudai. The Rashiv is saying a shir, be Amar, and he said, Mistaber, time of the Pliny Chacham, this Chacham, he's probably right. Ein Talmida of Lameid and Misham Allah. His Talmidim can't say, oh, that's Allah Lamaisa. The Shema im Yavai Liyadei Maisa. Maybe if the Rebbe would have an actual case to paskin upon, Yidaktik Yoser, they'll look into it even deeper. The Yira Tam Acher B'Dover. In other words, the favorite term the Rashiv uses are l'chayra or l'chuva, depending on what type of Rashiv you are. That doesn't work. If the Rashiv is l'chayra, it should be mutter, don't paskin based on that. V'lemi pimaisa. Im yira rabbi oisa maisa, even if he saw his Rebbe paskin that way, still al yikva halacha b'kaf. The shema tov tam shel psak din shel oisa maisa. Maybe you don't fully understand the nuances of the case and why your rabbi paskin that way. The harbor toyin b'davar aliva. People make mistakes. Kedamrinon. But the pliny love a fair shit more elam chola it more vitar b'svara like the Rishbam said a moment ago. But what can you be saying on? So we have a long Rishbam because this is very relevant as to what this is referring to. So it's kedai to learn the Rishbam inside. This afternoon I didn't because I had a time to say over a story, but today I'm controlling myself. And this is a very yesodistic Rishbam. The Kivin Shishol al Yidei Mais. About you asked the Shaila because there was an actual case here. The Einan Yodim Bedavar, and you don't know anything. Ella Mashahu Aimer Lahem. And you present the Shaila, you know exactly what your Shaila is, and your Rabbi Paskins for you. Then Ein Loimer Tam Chazu Beit Layata. Then you won't say that maybe something happened. It's not that I heard of a third party didn't tell you. This is your Torah. You asked the Shaila, the Rav Paskin, you could take it to the bank, and that's correct. In another place they say, Ein lemeidin halacha mitoich Mishnah. You could never paskin a halacha from a Mishnah. Sometimes the Mishnah fears ois, Rabbi fears ois in the Mishnah, that you cannot paskin based on that. Kagoin hadatam b'meseches nida. Rabbi Eliezer Eimer arba noshim dayin shaiton. For someone, a woman who's constantly flowing. Kama tishra if they zava, how much should it flow from her? How long does it have to flow from her? That she consider it a zava. It says Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, all of these cases in the Mishnah it says v'halacha kawan the Tanoi. But all these cases, the Rebbe fears ois halacha kedvar, you cannot paskin like that. Even though it says in the Mishnah halacha kedvar, Shmuel felt the need to paskin like that. Why would Shmuel paskin like them? It's a meforshah Mishnah halacha kedvar. The teretz is, because Shmuel knew, you can't rely on that. Yashminon, the ein moirin halacha mitech mishnah. You could never paskin a halacha if the Mishnah says something. Ilab the kava halacha gemoisai, unless in the Gemara the Amoraim, the Amoraim concluded to paskin like that halacha the Mishnah. Uviyavamisnan ezeu mamzer shimon taimani oimer kol shechayovin olav karis. Anyone, any zivug that leads to an isser karis, the child of that zivug is a mamzer v'alocha kedvarav, and we paskin like him. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Yet that's not good enough. Be lav the pasuk the Gemara halacha k'moisai. If it wasn't for that the Gemara concluded that the halacha is also like him, lo yisamchinin apsak the. So the rule is, the Rashbam is proving from multiple places, even if the Mishnah says halacha kedvarav, we would not paskin like it. However, if a Gemara concludes that this is the halacha, that you can take to the bank. The kivin sheposkum, the kosvim, Rav Ashi v'Ravina, shem soifay ra vaday alayu samchin. If Ravina and Rav Ashi, or I shouldn't say it out of the order, the Rashbam says Rav Ashi and Ravina. Rav Ashi and Ravina is concluded that this is the halacha, and they're the end of the Gemara. They're the final word. We could rely on them 100% and pass like them. So to sum it all up, when a yochid is arguing with a rabbim, kihani, like the cases that the Rashbam just quoted, the multiple cases quoted, loy samchinon apsak halacha shel mishnah elam ken pasuk b'gemara. Whenever you have a yochid neged a rabbim, and the mishnah says pasuk like the yochid, you cannot rely on that, unless the Gemara also concludes that way. Aval apsak the Gemara. But if the Gemara concludes a certain way, samchinon the chulu havu halacha l'mais, then you could be soymeh that it's all halacha l'mais. Ella, Rabbi Yochanan levadoi hayamachmer la'atzmai. Rabbi Yochanan himself was machmir, and let's stop. I mean, this is the Gemara later, but we're here already, so we'll finish. Unless Rabbi Yochanan levadoi hayamachmer la'atzmai, Rabbi Yochanan even didn't let his talmidim rely on his own piskei halacha. When he instructed his talmidim, come on, like we're going to learn just in a couple of lines. Even if I say this is halacha, which the Rashbam is concluding the Gemara holds you can rely on that. If you said, when I say something, I don't want you to rely. Even if I said halacha is so and so, don't listen to me. Unless I say halacha lemaisa is like so and so. Other than that, I can't be sure that that's halacha. Behind Utaima, what's the reason? The Dilma Hodebe mehu psak halacha shepasak. Just because it said halacha k'moisoi, the Amoyer can reconsider. The Amoyer can reconsider. But if he said halacha l'maisa, that means he's rock solid sure he's not going to reconsider. After the tzaddik dies, then yesh lam lasis mashapasuk lahem, even though he didn't say halacha l'maisa, the kol mechayav lahardabei l'maisa till the day he died, he was not choshev. The choshev again. We can surely rely on every halacha that Rav Ashi concluded in the Gemara. Anything that the Gemara concludes, that you can rely on 100%. Who else are you supposed to ask? If you can't rely on the Gemara, who else are you supposed to ask? The katani halacha l'maisa. If you have to hear it and say halacha l'maisa, ha'einodam rishai l'chavish davar matter. No one's allowed to be mechavish. So avada you could rely on the psak of the Gemara. Lavada k'moshe pasku who achroinim hachnas. Like the achroinim, he's referring to the Amoraim as the achroinim, right? The late Amoraim, Rabbeinu Rav Ashi, the way they concluded the shas, that's 100% reliable. V'achi aminan Yerushalmi Rab Zira b'shem Shmuel Amar ein lemedin leimin halachos. V'leimin hagados, v'leimin atoseftos, v'leimin Gemara. V'leimar midivrei ha'amoraim. The Amoraim are the final word on psak halacha. V'leimi pimaisa cause of the Mishnah. You can't even rely on the story that the Mishnah sometimes relates to prove a point or uraisa. Going to pligi rabbim alei. If there's a rabbim arguing on the yachid, you do not rely on the yachid. Achayovu halacha lemaisa. K'leimar kein halacha leich v'seika. Unless they tell you this is what you should do. Unless the Amoraim tell you to do that. Or if they pass on an actual shaila, knowing that you were going to act based on their psak, going Hey, halacha,
They tell you.
right? So if you're asking him related to halacha l'maisa, and he says halacha kaplani, that's when you could rely on it. They don't have to speak on halacha l'maisa if it's actually a case of halacha l'maisa. But if they stop talking, then you have to say halacha l'maisa. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. V'amru loy halacha l'maisa. Then yelech liyasa maisa. Uvilvad shelo yidme. But you cannot compare one thing to another. 10-8. You cannot compare one thing to another thing. You cannot compare one thing to another thing. In other words, you can't say, oh, if he passes like this over here, then I could apply it to a similar case. Frank the Gemara, how could you say that? That's how Upstak Halacha works. If you ever look at a tshuva, they bring rise from different Gemaras and apply it to this case. So frankly, that's how Psak works. You see cases in halachos that the Gemara writes, and then you see how it applies to your case. Avada, you could compare, but there's certain cases where you cannot compare. By treifas, don't compare the halachos of treifa in one neighbor to another neighbor. Right? We know in some evorim, if there's a pinhole, it's going to be treif. If some of them, both membranes have to be cut. There's so many different nuances between different organs in the body of the cow, what will pass and what won't, and how it's done. So therefore, don't compare treifas in one limb to another limb. And it's not. It shouldn't even be strange to you that we're saying that. There's a certain aver called the tzumas hagidin. That's how Toshis is. It's a tzumas hagidin, and tzumas hagidin is a place in the leg of an animal where a whole bunch of arteries and veins are clumped together. Naturally, a critical place. And in the tzumas hagidin, if you make a cut on one side of the tzumas hagidin, it will be a treifa, and the other side it wouldn't be a treifa. Like, how could you tell? The Rashbam says it might be speaking to a tchul, it might be speaking about it might be referring to a spleen in one half of the spleen is thicker, or the touches, maybe it's tchul. You have a tchul thicker in one part than the other part. If you cut the thin part, it's straight. If you cut the thick part, it's not straight. It's very hard to know exactly how these things work. So there, don't use your logic. You can't paskin based on the internet, based on the treifas for dummies. There you need a rabbi to tell you exactly what each one is. Ravasi asked Rabbi Yochanan, we are now at the bottom of Kuf Lamed base. I'm a little bit late. So we're just a couple of lines, then we're going to go back. See, that's why on the screen I have always pointed there, so you can always see where we're holding. So what should we do? So Rabbi Asi asked Rabbi Yochanan, if you tell us a halacha, could we follow what you said? Amar, and this is what the Rashbam is referring to, that Rabbi Yochanan, normally if Rabbi Yochanan passed on something, you could trust him. But Rabbi Yochanan said, don't even trust me if you hear it from me. Amar loy savidu ad amina halacha l'maisa. Don't follow any psak that I tell you unless I specifically say that it's halacha l'maisa. So the Rashbam says, even though you could rely on the Moira, Rabbi Yochanan was extra careful. He said, don't rely on me unless I say halacha l'maisa. Amlu Rava l'Rav Papa u'Rav Huna b'Rei Rabbi Yeshua. So Rav had these two Talmidim, Rav Papa and Rav Huna b'Rei Rabbi Yeshua.
If you don't see the
That's a good answer for anything I have to understand.
Yeah. Ki asi paska de dina didi l'kamachu. Let's say I officiate on a case. I'm the judge of a case, and I write a psak, and you receive my written psak, and you look at the psak, and you see it doesn't make sense. You look at the psak that I made, and you're wondering, this doesn't make any sense. What's pshat? Don't just tear it up and assume I made a mistake. Until you come and challenge me. If I have a reason for my psak, I will gladly share it with you. And if it turns out that your argument is good, but la'achamisa, what if I write a psak and you only look at it after I die? So then, loy mikra tikru. This is Rava talking. Loy mikra tikru. Don't tear it up. Baru migmar loy nami loy shigmar minei. Don't learn from it. Don't follow. If you don't agree with it, don't follow it, but don't tear it up. Loy mikra tikru, because maybe I'm right. The avoy hasam dil mahava mina lechu taima. I might have explained to you the reasoning behind my psak. Migmor namel shigmor minay, but don't pass him like that if you disagree with it. You know why? The ein ledain ela masha einoy vrois. Now this is out of context because really ein ledain ela masha einoy vrois is he has to pass him based on the edim that present him, but we're applying it to his svara as well. If you don't hear the svara and your svara tells you to look a certain way, that's how you have to pass him. If that's the svara that the Rebbe put into your mind, that's how you have to pass him. And I shared a story this afternoon that I think Rabbi Kestemam said over once by Elvis Abanim. He said, I'm going to tell you when Reb Moshe Feinstein became a God Lador. He was a young man in his 30s, and he got his first stellar as a Rav in Russia. And the first week, everyone's coming like when a new supermarket opens, everyone wants to go to try it out. A new Rav comes to town, everyone wants to try him out. So he's expecting a chicken bone, a chayes, a trifis, a Shabbos. A woman comes over to him, and it's like Tuesday, and she tells him, I'm a Naguna. In other words, we don't know if I'm allowed to remarry. Even if I knew I could get remarried, what are the chances of a woman living in a little village ever finding someone to marry her? Practically nil. And so she said, this man said, there's a man here in town, he's here until Sunday. He said he's willing to marry me, but he's not waiting. He's leaving Sunday. So if I'm ready by Sunday, he'll marry me. If not, no. So you think it's a little strange. I have an uncle who died at 104 in Los Angeles, my uncle Aaron. And after the war, he lost his wife and children in the war. And after the war, they read him a shidduch from a different city. He had to go like a 10-hour train ride. So his sister came with him. His parents were no longer alive. His sister came with him on the train to meet this potential kala. On the train, there was another lady on the train, and they were schmoozing with her, and she was a very nice lady. So my uncle says, why should I schlep down the house to meet this lady? I can marry this lady. And they married, and they lived happily ever after for 60 years. So he says that's how things worked in those days. So it was an opportunity.
And this is also.
This aunt, Mr. Werner, Shimon Werner, liked her, had something with her. Because every time he met me, he asked me, how's your Aunt Evie? Very, very nice lady. I'm not sure. Maybe he was on the next train. I'm not sure. Maybe could be she was on the train to go see Mr. Werner, and she also said, why should I slept dead? I could go here. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, are we going to get to the story with Rav Moshe?
Oh, I forgot about that. So they asked, thank you for reminding me. So this lady asked Rav Moshe, that was a shver shayla, a good shayla. So Rav Moshe sent a letter to Rav Chaim Moser, who was the Posek Ador, to ask him the shayla.
This is a Tuesday. He's leaving already on Sunday.
Right. Yeah, but it was just a day. It was probably the next village. So he gets back a letter 2 days later. Chaim Moser says, this is a very shver shayla. I don't have time to work on this shayla now. I'm going to need at least a week till I can get back to you because I'm busy with other things. I'm not going to be able to pass. So Rav Moshe was in a pinch. He had a deadline Sunday, so he locked himself up and he scanned Bavali, Yerushalmi, Rishonim, Achroidim, Sifri, Sifra. He scanned Kol Tarkula and he came out and he passed and you marry the man. And she married the man and they lived happily ever after. I'm not sure exactly where they lived, but they got married.
It's in the book of
No, you missed the most important part.
And she missed, and then on Tuesday, you got a letter from Moiser saying, I tutored Dr. Shaila, she's usher. She's also.
2 days later.
Is that the story? She's also. So Reb Moshe, everybody else would have folded like a cheap deck of cards. Reb Moshe said, I followed the halachas of Psak that I was taught by my Rebbeim. I went through all of the relevant sugyas to the best of my ability, and this is the Psak that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me. This is the Psak, and I stand by it. Then Reb Moshe became a God Lador. Two sides places. What? That's right. Okay, gewaltig. Because let's stop here.
That's not what he's saying.
No, because he stood by his psak and he
But
wasn't.
yeah,
He
that's
wasn't.
Chaim
Chaim Moshe passed against it.
Are we done today's up?
That's today's up. So now we have to go back to where we left off Thursday night. So we're finished today's stop. So I'm gonna shut the recording, and then we will. How do I shut the recording?
Go ahead.
Shkoyach. Then we'll go back.